Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yasodhanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yasodhanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yasodhanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yasodhanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yasodhanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yasodhanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivakatara Saraswati Srimad, His Divine Grace Sri Lesa Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivakatara Saraswati Srimad, His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Sri Guru Parampara Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai, Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. Go Premananda Hari Hari Bo. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. All together, please. Om Jnana Timarandasya Ganandana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yukta Parakamalam Shri Gurung Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagradatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Tam Sarivam Sarvetam Savadutam Prijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padang Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karana Sindhu Dhena Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapcha Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Prishavana Sudadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakaupatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. So, reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita, translation and commentary, His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Today's verse number 3, chapter 8, entitled, Attaining the Supreme. Now, there's an idea, how to attain the Supreme. It's in this chapter. Right? If we understand we're not the body, we're eternal, then we know there's a future. So even if we're selfish, we think, what's my best future? My best future is with the Supreme, right? Not with the material energy. So this chapter, Krishna gives all the information. So, please repeat. Shri Bhagavan Vacha. I think this needs to go up a bit. There's only 3, that's it. Shri Bhagavan Vacha. Aksharam Brahma Paramam Svabhavo Jatmam Uchate Bhuta Bhavodbhava Sharo Vishaga Karma Samjitaha Shri Bhagavan Vacha Aksharam Brahma Paramam Svabhavo Jatmam Uchate Bhuta Bhavodbhava Sharo Visharga Karma Samjitaha. Okay, अद्य श्री भगवान् उवाच अक्षरं ब्रह्म परमं स्वभावाध्यात्म उच्यते भूतभावोद्भवकरो विसर्ग कर्म संगीतः
श्री भगवान् उवाच अक्षरं ब्रह्म परमं स्वभावोऽध्यात्ममुच्यते भूतभावोद्भावकारो विसर्गकर्म संहितः
श्री भगवान् उवाच अक्षरं ब्रह्म परमं स्वभावोऽध्यात्ममुच्यते भूतभावोद्भवकरो विसर्गः कर्म संहितः
Maharajas, go ahead. Vaishnavis. Vacha Aksharam Brahma Paramam Swabhavojatmam Uchyate Bhuta Bhavodbhavakaro Visharga Karma Samjitaha Shri Bhagavan Vacha Aksharam Brahma Paramam Bhavojama Uchyate Buddha Bhava Bhavadsharo Visharga Karma Samjitaha. Okay, word for word, please repeat. Shri Bhagavan Vacha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Aksharam, indestructible, Brahma, Brahman, Paramam, transcendental, Swabhavaha, eternal nature, Ajatmam, the self, Uchyate, is called Bhuta Bhava Ubhashara, producing the material bodies of the living entities. Vishargaha, creation. Karma, fruitive activities. Samjitaha, is called. So, translation Srila Prabhupada, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, the indestructible, transcendental living entity is called Brahman, and his eternal nature is called Adhyatma, the self. Action pertaining to the development of the material bodies of the living entities is called karma, or fruitive activities. Oh, please repeat. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, the indestructible, transcendental living entity is called Brahman, and his eternal nature is called Adhyatma, the self. Action pertaining to the development of the material bodies of the living entities is called karma, or fruitive activities. Purport Srila Prabhupada. Brahman is indestructible and eternally existing, and its constitution is not changed at any time. But beyond Brahman, there is Para-Brahman. Brahma refers to the living entity, and Para-Brahman refers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The constitutional position of the living entity is different from the position he takes in the material world. In material consciousness, his nature is try to be the Lord of matter. But in spiritual consciousness, Krishna consciousness, his position is to serve the Supreme. When the living entity is in material consciousness, he has to take on various bodies in the material world. That is called karma, or varied creation by the force of material consciousness. In Vedic literature, the living entity is called Jivatma and Brahman, but he is never called Para-Brahman. The living entity Jivatma takes different positions. Sometimes he merges into the dark material nature and identifies himself with matter, and sometimes he identifies himself with the superior spiritual nature. Therefore, he is called the Supreme Lord's marginal energy. According to his identification with material or spiritual nature, he receives a material or spiritual body. In material nature, he may take a body from any of the 8,400,000 species of life, but in spiritual nature, he has only one body. In material nature, he is manifested sometimes as man, demigod, animal, beast, bird, etc., according to his karma. To attain material heavenly planets and enjoy their facilities, he sometimes performs sacrifices, yajna. But when his merit is exhausted, he returns to earth again in the form of a man. This process is called karma. The Chandogya Upanishad describes the Vedic sacrificial process. On the sacrificial altar, 5 kinds of offerings are made into 5 kinds of fire. The 5 kinds of fire are conceived of as the heavenly planets, clouds, the earth, man, and woman. And the 5 kinds of sacrificial offerings are faith, the enjoyer of the moon, rain, grains, and semen. In the process of sacrifice, the living entity makes specific sacrifices to attain specific heavenly planets and consequently reaches them. When the merit of sacrifice is exhausted, the living entity descends to earth in the form of rain, then takes on the form of grains, and the grains are eaten by man and transformed into semen, which impregnates a woman, and thus the living entity once again attains the human form to perform sacrifice, and so repeat the same cycle. In this way, the living entity perpetually comes and goes on the material path. The Krishna-conscious person, however, avoids such sacrifices. He takes directly to Krishna consciousness and thereby prepares himself to return to Godhead. Impersonalist commentators on the Bhagavad Gita unreasonably assume that Brahman takes the form of Jiva in the material world. And to substantiate this, they refer to chapter 15, verse 7 of the Gita. But in this verse, the Lord also speaks of the living entity as an eternal fragment of myself. The fragment of God, the living entity, may fall down into the material world, but the Supreme Lord Achyuta never falls down. Therefore, this assumption that the Supreme Brahman assumes the form of a jiva is not acceptable. It is important to remember that in Vedic literature, Brahman, the living entity, is distinguished from Para-Brahman. Mukham karochi vachalam pangam laite girim yat kripa tamaham bande Sri Guru Dinatarinam. Sri Bhagavan Vachan Akshara Brahma Paramam Svabhavo Jatman Uchite Bhuta Bhavod Bhavasharo Visharga Karma Samjitaha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, the indestructible, transcendental living entity is called Brahman, and his eternal nature is called Adhyatma, the Self. Action pertaining to the development of the material bodies of the living entities is called karma, or fruitive activities. Yes. So, Krishna is here starting to answer the questions Arjuna asked at the beginning of this chapter. Number 1. I think Krishna, Arjuna, he asked 7 questions. And so today's verse, number 3, is the beginning of the answer to these 7 questions. So we'll just revise those 7 questions to get the good context. Arjuna inquired, "O my Lord, the Supreme Person," Krishna says, Arjuna says, Purushottam, what is Brahman? Number 1. What is the self? 2. What are fruitive activities? 3. What is this material manifestation? 4. What are the demigods? Please explain this to me. So that's 5. And then in the second question, just before today's, who is the Lord of sacrifice and how does he live in the body? O Madhusudan. And how can those engaged in devotional service know you at the time of death? So, right, first question. As Prabhupada made clear in the purport, what is Brahman? Brahman means supreme. So Prabhupada makes clear in the purport that we are Brahman, we, Jiva. But we are Angsa of Brahman. So we are not supreme Brahman. We are the creation of Para Brahman, supreme Brahman, but we are not the creator per se. We have a creative element to us, our thought, our consciousness, our ability, our desires, but we are not the supreme. So that is Brahman. And that is an important distinction. We know that the Mayavadi philosophy or Confucian, they say the living entity, he is Brahman. That's it. No. He is not supreme Brahman. As we talked about last week, he is under the control of material nature. We cannot control this material nature. Good things come to us, but bad things also come to us. That is karma. We'll discuss that in a minute. So, that is Brahman. Brahman means you and me, the spirit souls, unless one of you is an incarnation of Krishna. Possible. But I'm a Jivatma, so I am Brahman. You are Brahman. You're Brahman. That's very nice, is it not? To think, oh, I am the Supreme. But we should get rid of depression. Nowadays everyone's depressed because of this psychological training. Everyone is a victim of the past. So how to overcome depression? To think, I am the Supreme. But I am the servant of the Supreme. I am the same quality as the Supreme, but I am the Supreme emanation. I am the emanation of the Supreme. I am the creation of the Supreme. So, that is Brahman, basically. What is the self? Yes, so I am not the Supreme Brahman. So then Arjuna's question is very pertinent. I'm not the Supreme Brahman. So what is myself? Now in the material world, Atma, Adhyatma, yeah, it's there, Adhyatma. Atma means, when we're in illusion, we think, myself is this body. Aham mameti, I'm this body. Me, the body. Male, female, old, young, it changes of course, but we think we're the body. And then we also think we're the mind. My ideas, my opinion, my philosophy. So we think those things. That is Atma. So Atma is a very broad term. But the real self is Jivera Swarupoi Nichera Krishna Das. That we are eternally, by constitution, the servant of the Supreme. And our relationship is prem. Our relationship with matter is not prem. As we talked about last week, we become bewildered by dualities. We can't get what we want. Life is a struggle and then we die. So that is not prem. That is illusory material world. It is the samskara, samsara, the birth of. And Prabhupada points out in today's purport that there is 8,400,000 species or categories of life in the material creation. I think it said there's 400,000 humanoid type species, if I remember correctly, and 8 billion animal categories, moving living entities, non-moving, living entities with claws, living entities without hands, so on and so forth. So they're all available. If you want to taste 8,400,000 species of life, then just perform karma, right? Is that the next one? Oh yes. Yes, so that is it. What are fruitive activities? What is karma? Right, everybody, especially nowadays, even if you go on YouTube, you'll see videos and it's called instant karma. So people are understanding what is karma. Karma means action, reaction, right? But Krishna gives the perfect understanding, the full meaning. Karma is action pertaining to the development of material bodies. What does that mean? Karma is material. It is a temporary function. Bhagavad Gita has 5 subject matters. 2 are temporary. One is karma and material nature. So these are temporary, they change. So what is karma? Karma says, yes, action pertaining to the development of material bodies. So now next time you meet somebody on the bus or on a park bench and they say, I know what the law of karma is. Yes, action and reaction in the material world. We live in a matrix, as we said last week, of action and reaction. We're always navigating within action and reaction. So, but the ultimate goal of that is, the ultimate understanding is that if we perform material activities, you can close that door. If we perform material activities, then that will have a bearing upon our future material body. So they're called fruitive activities. I remember I first heard this, fruitive activity. What is fruitive? Fruit? Well, trees bear fruit, right? You plant a seed and then the fruit comes. So this is meant to evoke the understanding that we perform activities and then there is a fruit, there is a result that comes. Can you close that door? Oh, it's the telephone. So anyway, so fruitive activities. And ultimately, they produce an effect on the material body. So it's very complicated. There's many, many fruitive activities. Krishna says that even the great sages have different concepts of karma. But Krishna makes the final point. It will bear upon your future birth. And that's also in the Bhagavatam, 3rd canto. Lord Brahma says, explains that karma, material activities, generally bear fruit in the next life. So therefore, if you live like a pig, you become a pig. If you live very nicely and moral and you perform yagyas, Vedic yagyas, then you become elevated. If you live like an animal, you will become if you're a nasty person, in the next life, nasty things will happen to you. We all can. So it can be understood in reference to the next lifetime. But of course, instant karma is there. You know, if your daughter's getting married and you drink too much daru, then the next life, the next morning, you get your instant karma. So, but generally it is pertaining to the future life, karma. So we're not Brahman, we're not Parabrahman, we're Brahman, and we have a self which is undiscovered or unmanifest in the material condition, and that is Gopibhata Kamalayo Dasa Dasana Das. We have a spiritual constitution relationship with Krishna. And we are now suffering in the material nature according to karma. So, what is this material manifestation? So that is the other, like I say, there's 5 subject matters in the Gita. 2 are Mayik. They are about the material nature. 1 is karma, because you're performing activities and you're getting a fruit. And then, as Prabhupada said in the purport, you're going to the heavenly planet, but when your good credit is worn out, you return down to karma bhumi, bhumandala. So that is temporary. And also, anyway, never mind. So that is temporary, and also the material manifestation is temporary. This is material energy. This is a microphone, but it will be temporarily so. Eventually there will be pralaya, and all the material energy will be dissolved back into the pradhan, the causal ocean. So they're the 2 material concepts discussed in the Gita. The other 3, for your interest, are the Supreme Lord, Bhakti, and the eternal living entity. They are eternal. They are above the material energy. How can we understand, incidentally, while we're on this, how can we understand that karma and the material manifestation are mayik, or temporary, illusory? Illusory in the Vedic paradigm means temporary manifestation. They're not eternal. Eternal means beyond time. So we understand karma and the material manifestation because they are below time. This is an interesting point. Mahavishnu glances at the pradhan, the personification, Durga Devi, the Mahatattva arrives. Now, and then the material energy and the living entities enter into the material manifestation. So that glance of Mahavishnu upon Durga Devi, the personification of material energy, contains the Kala Shakti. The Kala Shakti means the time potency. Time is also a subject of the Gita. So the material manifestation is created by time interacting, creating the 3 modes, with the pradhan, putting it simply. It is after time acts. It is after the action of time. And similarly, the living entities enter into the material nature, desiring to enjoy matter, and they perform fruitive activities within material nature, but that is after the exertion of time. Do you see the point? So everything that is eternal is above the time factor. The living entity is created above the time factor. We're not created in the material world. That's what the Mayavadis think. The Mayavadis think that the consciousness or the Brahman or the energy, impersonal energy, interacts with the Maya Shakti and creates the jiva, creates the demigods. That's their incorrect theory. But actually, the living entity is a creation, it's a transformation of the Chit Shakti. It is a transformation of the consciousness of God. We are created out of the consciousness of the Supreme Brahman. Very interesting to think. The spiritual world is composed of the Chit Shakti. That means the spiritual world is composed of the consciousness of the Supreme. We say Chit, that means conscious. Achit means unconscious. Material world is unconscious. It is created after the action of the time factor upon the material energy in its base form, pradhan. So karma and the material manifestation are temporary, but the jiva, the spiritual creation, the Supreme Lord, his associates, they are all created above and beyond the material time factor. So that we should understand that. So Kala. Krishna says, Kalosmiyaham. It is the... Krishna is everything, but he is that time factor. So he is creating the field for the living entities to enjoy or try to enjoy matter. But he's also creating the material energy as a place for his pastimes, to liberate the living entities and to manifest the spiritual world and be recorded in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and to give chance to the living entities to give up your idea of controlling matter and come back to the spiritual world. So therefore he comes as Lord Chaitanya, Nityananda, Panchatattva, all the great acharyas. So it's very interesting. Krishna is the time factor, and through the time factor, he is creating the material manifestation. Now, if you remember, you're all learned devotees, in the 11th chapter, Krishna shows the Virat Rupa. That means the totality of the material energy. And Arjuna is seeing, oh my God, look at this material energy. Everything is being destroyed and it's going into the mouth. And then he asks Arjuna, he says, who are you? Who? You know, he's completely stunned. And what's Krishna's answer? Kalosmiyaham. I am time, and I am the destroyer of all worlds. Right? So the time factor creates and he destroys. He creates, maintains through time, and then he destroys. So that is Krishna. Krishna is absolute. His evidence of his absolute nature is manifest in the material world in the sense that nobody can overcome time. We talked about this last week. Right, nowadays they want globalism, control, do this, a new fashion of living entities, 50-minute this, do this. But they will fail because the ruler of the material world is time, Krishna. So this is an important point. Krishna is the time factor, and everything that is created within the material sphere on the material platform is temporary. So, what is this material manifestation? What are the demigods? So Krishna, previous chapter, if you remember, Krishna says you should perform yajna, but some people, they don't want to perform yajna. To me, they perform to the demigods, and if you worship the demigods, yes, I will make your faith strong so that you perform yajna to the demigods, but I am ultimately giving the result through the demigods. So, Krishna is Adhyatma, Adidevam. He's the origin of the Devatas, and the Devatas, the demigods, are empowered to govern this material nature. They are just like, for example, the Prime Minister of India is Narendra Modi. But he has empowered different people. You are in charge of railways. You are in charge of health department, financial department, defense department. So Krishna empowers the demigods to rule over different elements of the material creation. And they do so harmoniously, generally. They have disagreements sometimes, but generally they do so because they're devotees. And they're very powerful devotees, and Krishna has empowered them to rule over the material nature. Just like India. If we didn't have a government, India might dissipate, right? You can say. People might drive on any side of the road. Of course, they do that anyway. But the point is, the government maintains the laws. It creates the laws, maintains them. So the demigods, they maintain and create the material, and but they maintain the laws of the material nature. So that is the demigods. So they call demigods Devata because they're devotees, Deva. But they're called, translated demigods, because their power is so amazing. They are ruling over the basic elements. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, Chandra, direction, and Surya. These are the 8 Vasus. They're primary in the demigods. So, what are the demigods? So that's the first 5. Who is the Lord of Sacrifice, right? Because Arjuna is talking to Krishna, and he says, you're Krishna, you're my chariot driver, and, you're from Vrindavan, and now you're staying in Dwarka. Who is this Lord of Sacrifice? And how does he live in the body? So that's one question, 2 parts. And so we know Krishna, the Lord of Sacrifice is Paramatma. He is living within the heart. How can those engaged in devotional service know you at the time of death? This is the title of the chapter. How can you attain the Supreme? Get out of this material energy, get out of the time factor. How can you go to the transcendental abode? So Krishna starts to answer. We'll just read them through. Today, the verse, the indestructible transcendental living entity is called Brahman, and his eternal nature is called Adhyatma, the self. Right? So we all have a constitutional nature. Now, this is a very important point, because amongst the Vaishnava community, there are some people that say, we have no fixed self. But during the period of sadhana, you can choose your relationship with the Supreme, and by meditation attain that Supreme, that relationship with the Supreme. But no, that is not pure Vaishnavism. That is a mixture of Mayavad, because it starts with the idea that the spirit soul has no fixed nature. He is an impersonal spark. But Jivera Swarup, Swarup. There is one sloka in the 3rd canto. Muktir hitavanyata rupam swarupena abhavashtati. That mukti means to be established in your eternal relationship with the Supreme. So this is shastric, and it is logical. Krishna has his eternal nature. We have our eternal nature because we are the same as Krishna in quality. We all have a constitutional nature. And you can take a hint in the truth of this, that in your life, now we're a bit older, but when we were children learning to ride a bicycle, I was the same person then that I am now, right? We know I'm the same person that used to disobey my father when he said, do your homework, right? We know that we are the same person now that we were 10 years ago. So this indicates the eternal nature of the self. However, our eternal relationship with the Supreme Lord has not grown from the soul yet. Nitya Siddha Krishna Sadhukabadai Shravanadi Sudhitare. So we have eternal nature, self. We can perceive that. I'm the same person I was 40 years ago, so on and so forth. But my Swarup is not developed. And Prabhupada explains that in a letter in 1969 to Rupanuga. He says, the soul is like a seed. Within every seed there is a tree. So every soul has a tree, a Swarup, inbuilt. Through the process of bhakti, that Swarup manifests. So, that is the eternal self. That is Adhyatma. So don't fall for the Mayavadi idea that has permeated the Apasampradayas, because they think, oh, the soul is just a spark. He doesn't have bliss. He doesn't have chit. He's just a spark. But by the Guru's grace, you will attain. So now you must take Siddha Pranali, you must have a Diksha Patra, you must do this, and you must pay the Guru. So don't fall for that. You have your Swarup. It is inbuilt to your soul. All you have to do is develop Seva Bhav to the transcendental personalities, and that Swarup will gradually manifest. So, action, yes, today's verse, action pertaining to the development of material bodies is called karma. So now you know the root understanding of karma. Karma, the root understanding is action, reaction, as you sow, you will reap, very nice, good. But the root is, it will define your next material body. So we should be careful, right? So then, O best of embodied beings, the physical nature, which is constantly changing. Now you see, Arjuna, if you remember, said, what is this cosmic manifestation? What is this material world that I'm in? We are the indestructible, eternal living entity, but the physical nature, which is constantly changing, that means it's non-eternal. It is changing under what? The time factor. Time factor is the ruler in the material world. The universal form of the Lord, which is the Virat Rupa, which includes all the demigods, like the sun and moon, is called Adidaiva. So this is the important point. He said, what is this cosmic manifestation? Then he asked, what are the demigods? Right, because they are woven together. Material nature, as we've discussed, is ruled over by the devatas. So what is this cosmic manifestation? What are the demigods? This is me. I am the Virat Rupa. Because if you remember, knowledge of the Absolute at the beginning, Krishna explained, Bhume, Apo, Nalo, Vayu, all this material energy, this is me. This is my material energy. It is temporary, in flux, but it is me. That's very interesting, because in the man-made religions, sometimes there's God, and this material world is the devil, right? There is God, and the devil is ruling this material world. So no, we don't say that. That is not the Vedic conclusion. Everything is emanating from the Supreme Lord. The material energy is emanating from the material. It's governed by the Supreme Lord, but it is governed according to the karma and karma of the individual souls in relationship to ourselves, that definition. Meaning, our desire provokes us to certain action, and the action is called karma, and that brings a fruit, right? So this is an important point, that sometimes we'll say, oh, why did Krishna drop the bomb on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, right? No, he didn't drop the bomb. It was the American military that dropped the bomb. If we rob a bank and the judge says, why did you rob the bank? I want to know before I sentence you. He says, well, actually, I didn't rob the bank. Krishna did it. Krishna does everything. So what will the judge say? Well, Krishna is going to do everything to you now for 10 years in the jail. So we cannot say everything is happening because Krishna did it. Krishna is sanctioning everything, and everything is resting upon Krishna, but Krishna is fulfilling the desires of the living entities, even if they want to rob a bank or do something abominable. But they will then get the result. Ye tammam prapadyante. And Manush, everyone follows my path. So I am fulfilling the desire of the living entity. That is my humility. I don't interfere with his free will, but I do give instruction through the sadhus, through Chaitaguru, conscience in the heart. I say, don't do that, don't do this, but you insist, so then you get the karma, the result. So that is, take some complete contemplation to understand that. The relationship between karma and calm. The desire of the living entity, he has free will to desire this, do this and that, but then karma follows that activity, And Krishna is facilitating. If you want the intelligence to rob a bank, Krishna will give you the intelligence, right? If you want to be an atheist, Krishna is so liberal, he will give you the intelligence to be an atheist. So if you want the intelligence to be Ravana or a follower of Ravana, he will give you intelligence to do that. So he is facilitating, but it is wrong to say that just because he is facilitating the material activities, he is desiring those material activities to take place. You see the point? He's giving us the choice and giving us facility, but that is not his desire. His desire is give up this material world and come and live in the eternal world. Right. So, yes. So we'll just repeat number 4. The physical nature, which is constantly changing, it's non-eternal, is called Adibhuta. The universal form of the Lord, Virat Rupa, that's the cause which includes all the demigods, like those of the sun and moon, is called Adideva. That Krishna, Arjuna asked that. And I, the Krishna asked, how does he live in the Lord of sacrifice? And I am the Supreme Lord, represented as super soul in the heart of every living entity. I am called Adiyagya, the Lord of sacrifice. So actually everything is a sacrifice. All activities, all pursuance in the material world are a form of sacrifice, and super soul is giving the result of that sacrifice. So then it goes on to number 7. And whoever that now, then Arjuna said, and how can I know you? Now you're telling me all about the material nature. How can I know you at the time of death? How can I get out of this material world? I'm eternal. I don't want to stay in 8,400,000 species of life. How can I get out? And whoever at the end of his life quits his body, remembering me alone, at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. So, sometimes people say, oh, you have to have this, you have to have this guru, you have to have that, you have to know this, you have to know that. But here, again, Krishna comes to the point. That's why we should read about Krishna. He comes to the final point. If you leave your body remembering Krishna alone, that means, Krishna, you are my Supreme Lord. I offer my obeisances unto you. Then he will take you. That is illustrated in the beginning of the Bhagavatam with the Leela of Narada Muni. And then you attain, of this there is no doubt. So Krishna is making it strong. Of this there's no doubt. And then, so that's the answer to those 7 questions. But then Krishna throws in something nice at verse number 6. He says, whatever state of being one remembers when he quits the body, O son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail. So if you think about your mother when you're dying, you will go to where your mother is. We're putting it very simply. If you think about your pet dog when you're dying, then you may become a dog. Well, that's also in the Bhagavatam, right? In his previous lives, there was that sadhu. He thought about the deer when he left his body. So he became a deer. So whatever state you think about. So this is very important because we have free will. So we must learn to remember Krishna. We have to exert our ability. And then number 7. And then Krishna explains, okay, how I can remember you at the time of death. You said I should remember you alone at the time of death. Then Krishna expands the idea. Therefore, Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna, not Paramatma. Because Paramatma is governing the material world, so Krishna is making it clear. Think of me as Krishna, Supreme Lord of Goloka, Yasoda Nandan. Nanda Nandan, the darling of Mother Yashoda and Nanda Maharaj. Think of me in that way. And at the same time, carry out your prescribed duty of fighting. Right? This is the first part of bhakti. Do your duty, but as an offering to the Supreme. And things that cannot be offered to the Supreme, don't do it. So live a pure life. Right? Just like we offer foodstuffs to Krishna, but we don't offer anything. We only offer those things that are acceptable to Krishna. So that's the rules of purity in sadhana bhakti. We don't, my daughter's getting married, I'll offer the daru to Krishna. No, Krishna doesn't want to drink daru. He doesn't want to eat slaughtered animals. He doesn't want to do this and that. He says, patram pushpam phalam, you know all that. So do your prescribed duty, but at the same time, think of me with all your activities dedicated to me and your mind and intelligence fixed on me through chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, and at the same time learning Siddhanta, that I'm teaching you now, Arjuna, and all the devotees, you will attain me without doubt. Right? So there it is, in 8 verses. So much knowledge, temporary material nature. We are Brahman, but we're not Brahman. We should meditate, this is Bhagavad Gita in 8 verses. We should do everything for Krishna, but only those things that can be done for Krishna. All right, I say that again. So that's the rules of purity. We should not be liars, rumor-mongers, nasty, envious. We should be sadhus. We should be kind and generous, tolerant and humble. We should try to develop good character. Right? So, we'll finish at that point. Number 8. So now you know Bhagavad Gita, material energy, eternal nature of the soul. You know how to attain Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Thank you all very much. Any quick question? Yes.
Thanks for a wonderful class. My question is like, how does the living entity first come to the material world? Is it through the glands of Krishna that he pushes all the living entities down? Or as it is said here, through the rain it comes, then it forms seed, and how exactly is it?
Well, that, which was in the purport, about how the living entity as a soul comes down from Svargaloka, or the higher realms. So that is not the initial entrance into the material world. That is part of the transmigration process. The upper regions of the material world, like Svargalok, Janalok, Mahalok, Tapalok, Janalok, they are more subtle. So when you go to those realms, you enjoy, because you don't have a gross body. You have a mental body, and the situation for your mental body is very delicious and tasty materially. So you come back, when you're good credits, you come down to Karma Bhumi, Bhumandala, different lifetime. So that is different from how the living entity initially comes into the material energy, rather than how he initially comes, rather than his transmigration. So Prabhupada, like he hinted in one purport there, he says, somehow or other we're in this material world. And he always emphasized, especially when we were new devotees, 1 or 2 years, hadn't even read the Gita or the Bhagavatam, he said, don't be too much concerned about how you have come to the material world, but try to learn how to get out. But that does not mean that we should not know how we came to the material world, because Siddhanta, Bhulya Jeev, Bhogyavan, Chakori, Krishna. We should know Siddhanta in all areas so that we don't speculate, and our intelligence is satisfied. So we come here, the basic understanding is how we initially come to the material world. We are tatasta shakti, tatasta. So again, like Krishna goes to the root, so we should understand we are tatasta shakti. That means we're on the tata, the line, between the material energy and the spiritual energy. And from that position, we choose Seva to Krishna, or we choose Seva to ourselves in the material world. So this is the basic understanding. Now the location of that tata, let me read something for you. Verse number 11 of Brahma Samhita, Shahasra Su, Krishna says. So now you've understood it in basic point. So, Shahasra Shesha Purusha Sharasha Raksha Shastrapat Shastra Bahu Vishatma Shastra Amsa Shastra Su. The Lord of the material world, of the mundane world, Mahavishnu, possesses thousands and thousands of heads, eyes, and hands. Paramatma, Mahavishnu, Garbhadakshay Vishnu. He is the source of thousands of avatars in his thousands of subjective portions. So he expands for his Leela in the material world. He expands in thousands of forms, as Paramatma, as Leela avatars, as Shaktivesh avatars. He is now, look what Lord Brahma has said. He is the creator of thousands of individual souls. So Mahavishnu, who is in the Pradhan, is on the borderline of spiritual and material energy. The material energy is differentiated by the three modes of material nature. But from the Pradhan aspect, or the Viraja, it's in a neutral point. And on one point is the spiritual creation, and the other point is the material creation. And now Mahavishnu is the creator of thousands of individual souls. Now when we talk about Mahavishnu, this verse about, we should understand that Mahavishnu is a plenary portion of Krishna. Plenary means, do you understand? He's a complete manifestation. The Shaktivesh avatar is not a complete manifestation of Krishna. Just like Vedavyas, he is Shaktivesh avatar, but he's empowered to write the Vedas, but he's not plenary. Vedavyas is not creating spirit souls, but Krishna, through Mahavishnu, creates the Tatastha Shakti. And this Mahavishnu is within the causal ocean, the Pradhan, and the living entity, when he comes to out of Susupti, he can sense the material creation, he can sense the spiritual creation, and calm. He has free will to choose. So he either becomes engrossed in the spiritual energy, or he becomes entangled in the material energy. Now, just on this point, the final paragraph of the final purport in the Gita it's very interesting. Yes. So, this is the final paragraph, the final verse, final chapter of the Gita. The living entity in his original position is pure spirit. He's just like an atomic particle of the Supreme Spirit, right? He's Brahman, but he's not Parabrahma. He's a particle. Thus, Lord Krishna may be compared to the sun and the living entities to sunshine, particles of sunshine. I think the modern scientists say photons. They don't know if sunshine is a wave or a particle, but they call them photons. But it means particle of sunshine. So, I'll say that again. The living entity in his original position is pure spirit. He's just like an atomic particle of the Supreme Spirit. Thus, Lord Krishna may be compared to the sun, and the living entities compared to sunshine, because the living entities are the marginal energy of Krishna, having emanated, as Brahma Samhita says, having emanated from Krishna. They have a tendency, because they are the marginal energy, they're on the margin of matter and spirit in terms of consciousness. They have a tendency to be in contact either with the material energy or with the spiritual energy. In other words, the living entity is situated between the two energies of the Lord. Prabhupada is, right? So you're understanding what I'm saying is exactly what Prabhupada says. And because he belongs to the Spirit, I'll say that again. They have a tendency to be in contact with either the material energy or with the spiritual energy. In other words, the living entity is situated between the two energies of the Lord. And because he belongs to the superior energy of the Lord, he has a particle of independence. So we have calm, desire, free will. We can will this way or we can will that way. That is our nature. Krishna doesn't interfere with our operation of will. He has a particle of independence. By proper use of that independence, he comes under the direct order of Krishna from the marginal position. So Prabhupada doesn't say this, but you could add the counterpoint. By improper use of that independence, he comes under the material energy. Do you see? But Prabhupada doesn't say that, but the counterpoint is there. Thus so I'll say the last two sentences again. By proper use of that independence, he comes under the direct order of Krishna. Thus he attains his normal condition in the pleasure-giving potency. So this is, in summation, and if you want the details on this, how we have come into the material world, read chapter 15 of Jaiva Dharma. Jaiva Dharma. Have you got Jaiva Dharma? Get Jaiva Dharma. I published that book, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, it's Magnus Opus. Chapter 15 gives all the details of that, in summation, that we've just covered. The quotes from the Upanishads are there. There is one from Brihat Aranya Upanishad. There is a quote there. Translation is that the living entity is like a fish in a river. By choice, he can go to one side of the river or he can go to the other side of the river. That's the Upanishads describing it. And there's also another verse from the same Upanishad, Brihat Aranya, where he explains the living entity has free will and he can choose his destination. So we have free will within the material energy. We are operating and then we're getting karmic reaction. We have free will at the Tata. We have free will in the spiritual energy. That is, Krishna wants independent living entities, creative, who are thinking of new leelas, who are making jokes with him as the cowherd boys, he wants free, creative living entities. So that is our special gift from Krishna. Krishna has unrestricted free will, we are unrestricted within the creation of Krishna. There is that sloka, Nityo Nityanam Chaitanas Chaitananam Eko Yoda Dadati Kaman, that there is one supreme eternal, there is one supreme conscious beings, we are all conscious and we are eternal, but that supreme eternal Param Brahman is fulfilling the desires of all the other living entities. So that's why I say, so by good association we learn to desire correctly. That is sadhana bhakti. We serve the sadhus, we study the acharyas, siddhanta, and we make decision ultimately, yes, I'm going to be a devotee because I want to attain the supreme. I don't want to stay in the material world. That's our desire. So we cultivate that by sadhu sangha, sava shastra hoy, lavamata sadhu sangha, sava siddhi hoy. By good association, and that means by reading the commentary of great acharyas, by reading the shastra, by serving the guru, his order, then we develop our swarup in seva bhav. And then we go back to Godhead. But the root is, just like Krishna in today's chapter, you can see Krishna is very intelligent. He's unlimitedly intelligent. He always hits the nail on the head, right? What is karma? It is action that gives effect on the next body. So Krishna is saying that point. Use I've given you free will. Now all you have to do to attain me is meditate upon me. Bhajatam priti purvakam. So we should do our seva, our sadhana, but we should do it with priti purvakam, little loving affection. And then yeyatam prabhajante, if we offer loving affection, we play harmonium, we chant japa, we do loving affection, and then what will Krishna reciprocate? He'll reciprocate loving affection with us, right? So where there is no restriction at all for going back to Godhead, there's no restriction at all in becoming a prem bhakta. There is no restriction. If we just do bhajan, sadhana bhakti, with little priti purvakam, and we avoid negative things, then we go back to Godhead. Simple as that. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Okay, chapter 15, Jaiva Dharma. Everyone get a Jaiva Dharma.